Welcome, fellow chronicler of mechanical nightmares, to the deepest archives of metallic terror, where the thunder of artificial footsteps echoes through decades of cinematic history and the gleam of synthetic scales reflects humanity's eternal struggle between creation and destruction. Tonight, we shall journey through the birth, evolution, and legacy of cinema's most formidable mechanical kaiju. From its first spark of conceptual life to its modern digital incarnations, let the rhythmic pulse of servo motors and the hum of alien technology carry you into peaceful slumber as we walk together through the halls of monstrous engineering where metal meets myth in eternal conflict. In the twilight years of the 1970s, when the golden age of Japanese kaiju cinema had begun to show the strain of economic pressures and changing audience tastes, the creative minds at Toho Studios found themselves confronting a challenge that would define the next chapter in Godzilla's legendary saga. The Monster King, having battled countless foes from the depths of Earth and the vastness of space, required an adversary unlike any that had come before, a challenger that would not merely test his physical might, but confront the very essence of his existence as the ultimate apex predator. The genesis of what would become cinema's most iconic mechanical monster began not with grand designs or elaborate production meetings, but with the simple recognition that familiarity had begun to breed contempt among audiences who had grown accustomed to the spectacle of giant creatures laying waste to miniature cities. Jigen, the alien cyborg whose hooks and buzzsaw had provided memorable moments in the previous year's offerings, had served his purpose well, yet even his bizarre design and extraterrestrial origins had failed to recapture the primal fear and wonder that had characterized the monster's earliest appearances. Tomoyuki Tanaka, the producer whose vision had guided Godzilla through nearly 2 decades of cinematic evolution, understood that the solution lay not in creating another strange creature from distant worlds or forgotten ages, but in crafting an opponent whose very existence would serve as a dark mirror to everything that Godzilla represented. Where the original monster embodied nature's wrath against humanity's nuclear hubris, this new creation would represent technology's cold attempt to supplant the natural order entirely. The concept that emerged from the creative discussions at Toho was both elegantly simple and profoundly disturbing. What if humanity's greatest fear was not the arrival of some ancient force of destruction, but the realization that their own technological prowess could be turned against them by creating a perfect artificial replica of their most feared enemy? This mechanical doppelganger would not merely fight Godzilla, but would impersonate him, turning the monster's own fearsome reputation into a weapon of deception and conquest. Jun Fukuda, the director who had inherited the franchise from Ishiro Honda and guided it through its most colorful and adventurous period, approached the project with an understanding that this new monster represented an opportunity to explore themes that went beyond the simple spectacle of destruction. The mechanical Godzilla would serve as the ultimate expression of the alien invasion narrative that had become central to the series, yet it would do so in ways that challenged both the characters within the story and the audiences watching from their theater seats. The Black Hole Planet 3 aliens, whose civilization had been conceived as the puppet masters behind this technological terror, were envisioned not as the typical, conquering force that sought to claim Earth through brute strength, but as sophisticated strategists who understood that the most effective conquest would come through turning humanity's own fears and defenses against them. Their plan to create a mechanical replica of Godzilla represented the ultimate psychological warfare, exploiting the terror that the original monster had instilled in human consciousness while adding the horror of technological betrayal. These extraterrestrial architects of deception possessed capabilities that exceeded anything that had been attributed to previous alien antagonists in the series, for they had mastered not merely the technologies of space travel and energy manipulation, but the far more subtle arts of mimicry and impersonation. Their mechanical creation would not be a crude approximation of Godzilla's form, but a perfect replica that could fool even trained observers until the moment came to reveal its true artificial nature. The challenge facing the production team was translating this conceptual brilliance into a physical reality that could convincingly portray both the familiar form of Godzilla and the alien technology that lay beneath its deceptive exterior. The suit makers and model builders who had perfected their craft over years of creating increasingly elaborate monsters found themselves confronting requirements that exceeded anything they had previously attempted. For this creation had to function as both perfect disguise and mechanical revelation. The decision to construct the mechanical monster from gleaming silver materials represented more than mere aesthetic choice, but a deliberate statement about the nature of artificial creation and its relationship to the organic forms it sought to replace. Where Godzilla's rough hide spoke of ancient evolutionary processes and natural resilience, Mechagodzilla's polished surface would reflect the cold precision of industrial manufacturing and the alien mindset that valued efficiency over the messy complexities of natural development. The technical innovations required to bring this vision to life pushed the boundaries of what Japanese special effects could achieve within the constraints of their traditional suit-based approach to monster portrayal. The creation of panels that could open to reveal internal mechanisms, the integration of light-emitting elements that would simulate technological functions, and the development of new materials that could withstand the physical demands of suit performance while maintaining their metallic appearance, all represented advances that would influence not only this production, but future entries in the series. The rainbow-colored energy beams that would serve as Mechagodzilla's signature weapon were conceived as the ultimate expression of its alien origins and technological superiority. For these attacks represented energies that had never been seen in nature and could not be duplicated through conventional means. The visual effect of these multicolored death rays would provide audiences with immediate confirmation that they were witnessing something that transcended the normal categories of earthly creature, while their devastating power would establish the mechanical monster's credentials as a worthy opponent for the king of the monsters. The sound design that would give voice to this artificial predator presented its own unique challenges, for the creature's vocalizations had to convey both the mechanical nature of its construction and the alien intelligence that guided its actions. The electronic warbles and synthesized roars that emerged from the speakers would serve as audio signatures of technological intrusion into the natural world, sounds that had never been heard from any living throat, yet carried unmistakable menace and hostile intent. The marketing campaign that preceded the film's release understood the revolutionary nature of what audiences were about to witness, for this would be the first time that Godzilla himself would face an opponent that challenged not merely his physical supremacy, but his very identity as a unique force of nature. The promotional materials that appeared in theaters and publications carefully balanced revelation with mystery, showing enough of the mechanical monster to generate excitement while preserving the shocking moment when its true nature would be revealed on screen. The anticipation that built among fans and casual audiences alike reflected their unconscious understanding that something fundamental was about to change in their relationship with the monster they had come to know and fear. The promise of a mechanical Godzilla tapped into deep-seated anxieties about automation and artificial intelligence that were beginning to emerge in popular culture, while also offering the spectacle of unprecedented battles between organic and synthetic forces. The production schedule that guided the creation of this landmark film reflected both the urgency of capitalizing on audience interest and the careful attention to detail that such an ambitious project demanded. Every aspect of the mechanical monster's design and function had to be tested and refined until it could convincingly portray both the familiar and the alien, the recognizable and the impossible. The collaborative efforts of directors, designers, technicians, and performers that brought Mechagodzilla to life represented the culmination of decades of accumulated expertise in the creation of cinematic monsters. Yet it also marked the beginning of new directions that would influence not only Japanese filmmaking but international approaches to science fiction and fantasy cinema. The mechanical monster that emerged from these efforts would prove to be more than merely another opponent for Godzilla, but a cultural icon whose influence would extend far beyond the boundaries of any single film or series. In the workshops where craftsmen labored to transform raw materials into convincing technological terror, the birth of cinema's most formidable artificial creature proceeded with the methodical precision that would characterize every aspect of its on-screen presence. The marriage of imagination and technique that guided this creation process would establish new standards for what could be achieved through practical effects and traditional filmmaking methods, while the conceptual framework that supported these technical achievements would provide themes and ideas that would resonate with audiences across multiple generations and cultural boundaries. In the spring of 1974, when cherry blossoms bloomed across a Japan that had grown accustomed to the periodic visitations of giant monsters, yet remained perpetually unprepared for their actual arrival, the cameras began rolling on what would become the most deceptive opening sequence in the entire history of kaiju cinema. The film that would introduce Mechagodzilla to the world began not with fanfare or obvious mechanical marvels, but with a lie so perfectly executed that it would fool not only the human characters within the story, but the very audiences who had gathered in darkened theaters to witness the latest chapter in Godzilla's ongoing saga. The opening moments of this landmark film presented viewers with what appeared to be a familiar scenario, as Godzilla himself emerged from the depths of Tokyo Bay to begin yet another rampage through the metropolitan areas that had suffered his wrath so many times before. The monster that rose from the waters bore all the characteristics that audiences had learned to expect from their fearsome protagonist. The distinctive silhouette, the earth-shaking footsteps, the terrible roar that had haunted Japanese nightmares for 2 decades, and the destructive atomic breath that could reduce entire city blocks to rubble and flame. Yet something was wrong with this particular manifestation of the king of monsters, something that registered first as a subtle unease before building to horrified recognition as the deception became clear. The Godzilla that stalked through the miniature streets and toppled carefully constructed buildings moved with a mechanical precision that seemed somehow alien to the organic rhythms that had characterized his previous appearances, while his attacks followed patterns that suggested calculation rather than the primal fury that had motivated his earlier rampages. The genius of this opening deception lay not merely in its technical execution, though the craftsmanship required to create a convincing false Godzilla was considerable, but in its psychological impact upon audiences who had developed specific expectations about how their familiar monster should behave and appear. The imposter's actions violated the unspoken contract that existed between viewers and the character they had come to understand, creating a sense of wrongness that preceded any intellectual recognition of what was actually occurring. Anguirus, the loyal companion whose friendship with Godzilla had been established through their shared battles against common enemies, served as both the first victim of Mechagodzilla's deception and the unwitting hero whose sacrifice would expose the truth that human observers had failed to detect. The Ankylosaur's confusion and distress at encountering what appeared to be his trusted ally behaving in ways that contradicted everything their relationship had established provided audiences with their first clear indication that something fundamental had been altered in their familiar monster universe. The battle between Anguirus and the false Godzilla was choreographed as more than mere spectacle. though it provided that in abundance, but as a revelation of character that would resonate through every subsequent encounter between the real Godzilla and his mechanical duplicate. Anguirus approached the confrontation with the expectation of greeting a friend, only to find himself facing an adversary whose responses to familiar social cues were utterly wrong, whose attacks carried a cruelty that the real Godzilla would never direct toward an ally. The brutality with which the mechanical imposter dispatched Anguirus served multiple narrative functions, establishing both the artificial monster's physical capabilities and its complete lack of the emotional connections that had humanized Godzilla despite his destructive nature, where the real Monster King had learned to distinguish between friend and foe, had developed relationships that transcended species boundaries, had shown mercy and even affection toward those who had earned his respect. The mechanical duplicate possessed no such capacity for growth or emotional sophistication. The moment of revelation, when battle damage caused portions of the false Godzilla's organic-appearing hide to fall away and expose the gleaming mechanical components beneath, represented one of the most shocking and effective plot twists in the entire history of monster cinema. Audiences who had entered theaters expecting another conventional kaiju battle found themselves confronting something that challenged their basic assumptions about the nature of the creatures they had come to know and anticipate. The visual impact of seeing familiar organic forms giving way to chrome and circuitry created a sense of violation that extended beyond mere surprise, tapping into fundamental anxieties about authenticity, identity, and the potential for technology to replace rather than merely augment natural processes. The revelation that their beloved monster had been impersonated by an artificial creation forced viewers to confront questions about what made Godzilla himself authentic and irreplaceable. The mechanical systems that were revealed beneath the damaged organic disguise spoke of engineering capabilities that exceeded anything that terrestrial science could have achieved, while their alien design aesthetic reinforced the extraterrestrial origins that would soon be revealed as the driving force behind this technological deception. The smooth curves and precise joints of the exposed machinery stood in stark contrast to the rough, battle-scarred hide that had concealed them, emphasizing the fundamental difference between evolved organic form and designed artificial function. The true Godzilla's arrival to confront his mechanical duplicate was staged as both climactic revelation and cosmic justice, as the authentic monster emerged from his oceanic domain to challenge the imposter who had dared to assume his identity and abuse the fear that his name commanded. The contrast between the two figures, identical in overall form yet utterly different in presence and movement, provided audiences with a visual education in the subtle differences that separated the genuine from the artificial. The battle between Godzilla and Mechagodzilla that followed this revelation was choreographed as more than a simple contest of strength, though both monsters demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything previously seen in the series. This was a philosophical confrontation between organic authenticity and artificial perfection, between the chaotic creativity of natural evolution and the precise calculations of engineered design, between a creature shaped by millions of years of environmental pressure and one created in laboratories to serve the purposes of alien intelligence. Mechagodzilla's arsenal of weapons represented the ultimate expression of technological warfare adapted to kaiju-scale conflict, with each system designed to exploit specific vulnerabilities that had been identified through careful study of Godzilla's previous battles. The finger missiles that erupted from the mechanical monster's hands carried destructive power that had been calculated to penetrate even the toughest organic armor, while their precision targeting systems ensured that each shot would find its mark with mathematical certainty. The rainbow-colored energy beams that served as Mechagodzilla's primary ranged weapons were unlike anything that had been seen in previous kaiju battles, their multicolored nature serving as both spectacular visual effect and clear indication of their alien origins. These beams carried energies that had been unknown to terrestrial science, their very appearance suggesting forces that operated according to physical laws that human understanding had yet to discover or comprehend. The force field technology that protected Mechagodzilla from conventional attacks represented perhaps the most revolutionary advancement in the monster's defensive capabilities, creating barriers that could deflect even Godzilla's atomic breath while allowing the mechanical creature to advance steadily through barrages that would have devastated any organic opponent. This energy shielding demonstrated the alien's mastery of forces that human science could barely theorize, while its effectiveness against Earth's most powerful natural weapon emphasized the vast technological superiority that the invaders possessed. The Okinawan setting that served as the backdrop for much of the film's action provided more than mere exotic locale, but a cultural context that would prove crucial to understanding both the alien strategy and the eventual solution to their mechanical threat. The ancient traditions and spiritual practices that had been preserved on these islands carried within them wisdom that predated the modern technological age, offering insights that purely scientific approaches to the crisis would fail to provide. The prophecies and legends that spoke of King Caesar's role in defending the islands from supernatural threats proved to be more than mere folklore when the mechanical monster's rampage triggered the awakening of the ancient Bay, guardian whose slumber had lasted for centuries. The lion-dog deity, whose form combined elements of both Eastern and Western mythological traditions, represented the power of faith and cultural memory to stand against technological tyranny. King Caesar's emergence from his mountain shrine was presented not as mere coincidence, but as the fulfillment of ancient promises that connected the spiritual heritage of Okinawa to the cosmic forces that determined the fate of all life on Earth. The Guardian's leonine features and noble bearing marked him as a creature whose power derived not from size or destructive capability, but from his role as protector of those who could not protect themselves. The three-way battle that erupted when King Caesar joined forces with Godzilla against their common mechanical enemy represented the ultimate expression of the film's central themes, as organic authenticity and spiritual tradition united against artificial perfection and technological domination. The coordination between the two natural monsters demonstrated capabilities that exceeded mere instinctive cooperation, suggesting communication and strategic thinking that the mechanical invader could neither understand nor counter effectively. The combined assault that finally overcame Mechagodzilla's defenses required not only brute force but tactical innovation, as Godzilla and King Caesar learned to coordinate their attacks in ways that exploited the mechanical monster's programmed responses and revealed the limitations inherent in even the most sophisticated artificial intelligence. Their victory was achieved not through superior strength alone, but through the kind of creative problem-solving that organic intelligence had developed through millions of years of evolutionary pressure. The destruction of the first Mechagodzilla was staged as both spectacular climax and cautionary warning, as the mechanical monster's death throes demonstrated the awesome energies that had been contained within its artificial form, while its final moments revealed the alien operators who had guided its actions from their hidden command center. The revelation that the mechanical monster had been merely a tool rather than an independent actor added layers of complexity to the threat that had been neutralized but not eliminated. The box office success that greeted the film upon its release in Japanese theaters demonstrated that audiences had embraced both the technical innovations and the thematic sophistication that the production had achieved, while international distribution would eventually spread Mechagodzilla's fame far beyond the boundaries of his homeland. The mechanical monster's instant recognition as an iconic character worthy of merchandising and media attention established him as more than merely another opponent for Godzilla, but as a cultural phenomenon in his own right. Critical reception of the film praised both its technical achievements and its successful integration of familiar elements with revolutionary innovations, while the performances of the human cast were noted for their commitment to treating fantastic material with the seriousness that it required to maintain audience investment in the increasingly complex mythology that was developing around the kaiju universe. The cultural impact of Mechagodzilla's debut extended far beyond the immediate success of the film that introduced him, establishing visual and conceptual templates that would influence not only subsequent entries in the Godzilla series, but the broader landscape of science fiction and fantasy entertainment. The mechanical monster's design became a touchstone for discussions about the relationship between technology and nature, while his role as an artificial duplicate raised questions about identity and authenticity that would resonate through subsequent decades of popular culture. The legacy of this first encounter between Godzilla and his mechanical duplicate would prove to be both enduring and transformative, establishing patterns and themes that would be revisited and reinterpreted through multiple subsequent films, while creating a new category of kaiju that blended the spectacular destruction of traditional monster movies with the fears, philosophical implications of science fiction literature in the deep places of cinematic memory, where the echo of clashing titans still reverberates through time. The birth of the mechanical age had been achieved through this perfect fusion of spectacle and substance, innovation and tradition, creating something that was both entirely new and perfectly suited to the mythological framework that had been established through 2 decades of monster movies. In the year 1975, when the echoes of Mechagodzilla's first defeat had barely faded from the collective memory of those who had witnessed the mechanical terror's destruction, the creative minds at Toho Studios found themselves confronted with both opportunity and challenge in equal measure. The unprecedented success of the previous year's mechanical monster had established a new paradigm in kaiju cinema, yet the very completeness of that first victory over the alien-built duplicate had seemingly closed the door on further exploration of the themes and spectacular battles that had captivated audiences around the world. The solution to this creative dilemma emerged not from the corporate boardrooms where such decisions were typically made, but from an inspired writing contest that would forever change the trajectory of the Godzilla series while introducing one of the most compelling human characters in the franchise's long history. Yukiko Takayama, a 30-year-old aspiring screenwriter whose passion for cinema had been ignited during childhood visits to movie theaters with her painter father, possessed both the creative vision and the deep understanding of human emotion that would be necessary to craft a worthy successor to the mechanical monster's inaugural appearance. The contest that brought Takayama into the Toho family was conceived by producer Tomoyuki Tanaka as a method for injecting fresh perspectives into a series that had begun to show signs of creative fatigue after 2 decades of increasingly elaborate monster battles. The stipulation that any winning entry must include Mechagodzilla demonstrated the studio's recognition that the mechanical monster had transcended his role as mere antagonist to become a crucial element in the kaiju universe, a character whose potential had been only partially explored in his initial appearance. Takayama's winning submission stood apart from the other entries not merely through its technical competence or its adherence to established formula, but through its sophisticated understanding of the emotional and psychological depths that could be explored within the framework of a giant monster movie. Her story proposal wove together themes of scientific obsession, familial loyalty, technological horror, and tragic sacrifice in ways that honored the series' established traditions while pushing the boundaries of what such films could achieve in terms of character development and thematic complexity. The decision to hire Takayama to write the complete screenplay, rather than simply adapting her story concept, represented a rare vote of confidence in an untested writer, yet her work would prove that this faith was entirely justified. The script that emerged from her typewriter combined the spectacular action sequences that audiences expected from a Mechagodzilla film with character studies that possessed genuine depth and emotional resonance, creating a narrative that could satisfy both those who came seeking monster battles and those who desired more sophisticated storytelling. The most remarkable aspect of Takayama's creative process was her successful campaign to convince the studio to bring Ishiro Honda out of semi-retirement to direct what would become his final contribution to the series he had. Launched with the original 1954 Godzilla, Honda's return represented more than mere nostalgia or fan service, but a recognition that the complex themes and mature subject matter that Takayama had incorporated into her script required the steady hand and profound understanding of human nature that the master director could provide. Honda's acceptance of the directorial assignment came despite his advancing age, his contentment with his quieter life away from the pressures of commercial filmmaking, and his awareness that the economic constraints facing Japanese cinema would provide him with a budget that was inadequate for the ambitious vision that Takayama's script demanded. His decision to return was influenced by multiple factors, including his respect for the young writer's talent, his connection to his home prefecture that he shared with Takayama, and perhaps most importantly, his understanding that this might represent his final opportunity to contribute to the monster series that had defined so much of his career. The economic pressures that shaped every aspect of the production reflected the broader challenges facing Japanese cinema during the mid-1970s. As the oil crisis that had followed the Yom Kippur War continued to impact consumer spending, while foreign films increasingly dominated domestic box office receipts, the budget constraints that these conditions imposed upon the production would require innovative solutions and creative compromises that would test the skills of every department involved in bringing Takayama's vision to the found screen. The story that emerged from these challenging circumstances began with a haunting image that would establish both the mysterious atmosphere and the technological themes that would pervade the entire narrative. A woman standing alone on a windswept shore, gazing out across waters that concealed secrets buried beneath layers of time and sediment, served as both literal opening and symbolic representation of the human costs that would be extracted by the events that were about to unfold. The submarine sequence that followed this enigmatic opening provided audiences with their first indication that the previous film's victory over Mechagodzilla had been less complete than it had appeared, as the search for the mechanical monster's remains revealed that the alien technology had not been destroyed, but merely scattered and hidden beneath the waves that had witnessed its apparent defeat. The discovery that these fragments retained their deadly potential demonstrated that the threat posed by such artificial creations could not be eliminated through simple destruction, but required more complex solutions that acknowledged the persistent nature of technological power. The introduction of Dr. Mifune represented one of Takayama's most sophisticated character creations, a scientist whose brilliant mind had been warped by years of professional ostracism and personal tragedy into an instrument of revenge against the world that had rejected his visionary research. The backstory that revealed his discovery of Titanosaurus and his subsequent banishment from the scientific community provided a cautionary tale about the dangers of intellectual isolation and the corrosive effects of wounded pride upon Paonu, even the most noble motivations. The complexity of Mifune's characterization was enhanced by the performance of Akihiko Hirata, whose previous work as Dr. Serizawa in the original Godzilla had established him as the series' most compelling human character. Hirata's portrayal of the obsessed marine biologist drew upon his accumulated understanding of the moral ambiguities that characterize scientists in the kaiju universe, while his more flamboyant performance style in this later role reflected both the character's deteriorated mental state and the actor's recognition that this would be his final contribution to the series that had shaped his career. The creation of Titanosaurus as Mechagodzilla's ally represented a masterful stroke of narrative design that addressed the practical limitations imposed by the film's reduced budget, while introducing thematic elements that would enrich the story's exploration of the relationship between natural and artificial forces. The sea-dwelling dinosaur, whose prehistoric innocence had been corrupted by human ambition, served as both powerful, combatant, and tragic victim, a creature whose gentle nature had been perverted into an instrument of destruction through the machinations of those who claimed to understand and control him. The design and construction of Titanosaurus reflected the craftsmanship and attention to detail that had characterized Japanese special effects work throughout the series' history, while the creature's distinctive appearance and capabilities established him as a worthy addition to the pantheon of kaiju characters. The dinosaur's colorful hide and expressive features marked him as a creature of the natural world, while his impressive size and unique abilities ensured that he could serve as a credible threat to Godzilla's supremacy. The most revolutionary aspect of Takayama's script was her creation of Katsura Mifune, a character whose transformation from human to cyborg represented the ultimate expression of the story's themes about the intersection of technology and humanity. Katsura's journey from loving daughter to unwilling instrument of alien conquest provided the narrative with its emotional core while exploring questions about identity, free will, and the price of scientific progress that resonated far beyond the boundaries of monster movie conventions. The tragic backstory that revealed Katsura's near death in one of her father's experiments and her subsequent salvation through alien technology established the complex web of obligation and manipulation that would drive the character's actions throughout the film. Her transformation into a cyborg represented both a miraculous preservation of life and a fundamental violation of human autonomy, creating internal conflicts that would provide the story with its most compelling dramatic moments. The relationship that developed between Katsura and the marine biologist Ichinose served multiple narrative functions, providing the story with a romantic subplot that humanized both characters while creating emotional stakes that extended beyond the simple survival of civilization. Their growing affection for each other was complicated by Katsura's artificial nature and divided loyalties, creating a tragic love story that recalled the doomed romance between Beauty and Beast that had characterized many classic monster movies. The return of the Black Hole Planet 3 aliens provided narrative continuity with the previous film, while allowing for exploration of how their defeat in the earlier encounter had influenced their strategy for renewed conquest. The aliens' decision to work through human intermediaries rather than relying solely on their own technological superiority demonstrated a sophistication that had been lacking in their previous appearance, while their manipulation of both Dr. Mifune and his daughter revealed new depths of alien psychology and strategic thinking. The aliens' base of operations within Mount Amagi provided the production with an appropriately mysterious and threatening location for their activities, while the volcanic setting reinforced the story's themes about forces that lay hidden beneath the surface of ordinary reality. The contrast between the mountain's natural beauty and the technological horrors concealed within its depths served as a visual metaphor for the way that alien influence had corrupted the natural order. The construction of a new and improved Mechagodzilla within the alien facility represented the culmination of the invaders' technological capabilities and their determination to succeed where their previous attempt had failed. The mechanical monster that emerged from their laboratories incorporated lessons learned from the earlier model's defeat while adding new capabilities that would make it an even more formidable opponent for Godzilla and any allies who might come to his aid. The decision to make Katsura the control mechanism for the new Mechagodzilla represented both narrative efficiency and thematic sophistication, as it eliminated the need for a separate alien operator while creating direct connections between the human drama and the monster battles that would dominate the film's climactic sequences. The integration of human consciousness with mechanical systems raised profound questions about the nature of identity and free will that elevated the story above simple action spectacle. The relationship between Dr. Mifune and the aliens was characterized by mutual dependence and barely concealed antagonism, as each party attempted to use the other while maintaining their own independence and pursuing their separate agendas. This uneasy alliance provided the story with political complexity that reflected real-world situations where competing interests must cooperate, despite fundamental disagreements about goals and methods. The revelation that Interpol had developed a sonic weapon capable of disrupting Titanosaurus represented the kind of scientific solution that had characterized humanity's responses to kaiju threats throughout the series, while the device's limitations and vulnerability to sabotage demonstrated that technological fixes could never provide complete security against threats that possessed their own technological advantages. The three-way battle that erupted when Godzilla arrived to confront both Titanosaurus and the new Mechagodzilla represented the culmination of all the themes and character development that had preceded it, as organic authenticity faced artificial perfection, while human emotions and loyalties were tested under the most extreme circumstances possible. The choreography of this epic confrontation balanced spectacular action with character-driven drama, ensuring that the monster battles served the story rather than overwhelming it. The final confrontation that took place in the Mifune laboratory provided the human characters with their opportunity to influence the outcome of events that had seemed beyond their control, while the tragic resolution of Katsura's storyline demonstrated that some prices paid for technological advancement could never be recovered or redeemed. Her ultimate sacrifice to save the world that had been threatened by her father's obsessions provided the story with an ending that was both dramatically satisfying and emotionally devastating. The destruction of the second Mechagodzilla was achieved not merely through superior firepower, but through the severing of the emotional and technological bonds that had given the mechanical monster its power, demonstrating that even the most sophisticated artificial creations remained dependent upon human elements that could be influenced by love, loyalty, and moral choice. Honda's direction of this complex material demonstrated his continued mastery of the techniques that had made him the defining voice of Japanese monster cinema, while his ability to balance spectacular action with intimate human drama proved that age and experience had only refined his storytelling abilities. The melancholy tone that pervaded much of the film reflected both the director's personal circumstances and his mature understanding of the tragic themes that had always underlain the Godzilla series. The production's success in creating memorable characters, spectacular battles, and profound themes, despite severe budgetary constraints, demonstrated that creativity and craftsmanship could overcome financial limitations when guided by clear vision and supported by decades of accumulated expertise. The film that emerged from these challenging circumstances would stand as both a worthy conclusion to the Showa era and a demonstration that monster movies could achieve artistic as well as commercial success. The completion of Terror of Mechagodzilla marked the end of an era in multiple ways, serving as Honda's farewell to the series he had created, Hirata's final performance in a Godzilla film, and the conclusion of the original cycle of movies that had defined kaiju cinema for an entire generation. Yet, the themes and characters that Takayama had introduced would continue to influence subsequent entries in the series, while the tragic beauty of Katsura's story would remain as one of the most emotionally powerful elements in the entire Godzilla canon. In the year 1993, when the world had grown accustomed to living without the thunderous footsteps of giant monsters disturbing the peace of their daily existence, Japan found itself confronting a paradox that would define the next phase of humanity's relationship with the forces that had once terrorized their cities and haunted their collective nightmares. 18 years had passed since the final destruction of Mechagodzilla's second incarnation. 18 years, during which technological advancement had proceeded at an unprecedented pace, while the memories of mechanical terror had faded into the comfortable realm of historical curiosity rather than immediate threat. The generation that had witnessed the original mechanical monsters rampage through Tokyo's streets had grown older. Their children had been born into a world where such spectacles existed only in archived footage and museum displays, and the very possibility of encountering genuine kaiju seemed as remote as the prospect of meeting dragons or unicorns. Yet beneath the calm surface of this peaceful existence, forces were stirring that would soon shatter the illusion of safety and demonstrate that humanity's capacity for creating both wonders and terrors had only grown more sophisticated during the years of apparent tranquility. The United Nations Godzilla Countermeasures Center represented the culmination of decades of accumulated knowledge about giant monster behavior and the technological resources necessary to address threats that conventional military forces had proven incapable of handling effectively. This international organization, staffed by the world's leading experts in kaiju biology, advanced engineering, and strategic defense, had been established not because such threats were imminent, but because the lessons of history demanded that humanity be prepared for possibilities that they hoped would never again become realities. The development of anti-nuclear energy bacteria during the late 1980s had provided humanity with its first truly effective weapon against Godzilla's radioactive biology. Yet the success of this biological countermeasure had raised new questions about the ethics and long-term consequences of manipulating natural processes for military purposes. The bacteria that had seemingly destroyed the king of monsters had also demonstrated that human science possessed capabilities that could fundamentally alter the balance of power between civilization and the natural forces that had previously seemed beyond their influence or control. Yet, Godzilla's return from apparent death in 1991 had proven that even the most sophisticated biological weapons could not permanently eliminate creatures whose existence transcended normal biological categories. While his subsequent battles with Biollante and King Ghidorah had demonstrated that the kaiju age was far from over, despite humanity's confident predictions of its conclusion, the monster whose radioactive presence had defined Japan's nightmares for nearly 4 decades had evolved beyond their ability to predict or control his behavior, adapting to their countermeasures with a resilience that suggested intelligence far greater than they had ever acknowledged. The discovery of the infant Godzillasaurus on Adenoa Island had provided UNGCC with both an unprecedented research opportunity and a strategic asset whose potential applications extended far beyond simple scientific curiosity. This young member of Godzilla's species, uncontaminated by the radioactive mutations that had transformed his elder relative into a force of destruction, represented a living link to the prehistoric past and a possible key to understanding the biological processes that had created the modern monster king. The ethical debates that surrounded the decision to remove baby Godzilla from his natural habitat reflected broader questions about humanity's right to interfere with natural processes for their own purposes, while the infant's rapid growth and development under laboratory conditions demonstrated that even peaceful members of the Godzilla species possessed capabilities that exceeded normal biological parameters. The creature's apparent intelligence and emotional complexity raised uncomfortable questions about the moral status of beings who were neither human nor conventional animals. The Garuda project, that had been conceived as a high-speed interceptor capable of engaging aerial kaiju targets, represented Japan's continued commitment to developing indigenous defense capabilities, rather than relying solely on international cooperation or foreign military assistance. This sleek aircraft, equipped with advanced weapon systems and piloted by the most skilled aviators that the Japanese self-defense forces could provide, embodied the nation's determination to protect itself through technological superiority and strategic innovation. The decision to construct a new Mechagodzilla using the combined resources of international cooperation and Japanese engineering expertise reflected both the success of the original mechanical monster concept and the recognition that such artificial creations could serve humanity's interests, rather than threatening their survival. This latest incarnation of the mechanical kaiju would be built not by alien invaders seeking to conquer the Earth, but by human engineers committed to protecting their world from threats that conventional weapons could not address. The design philosophy that guided the creation of Super Mechagodzilla emphasized functionality over intimidation, precision over brute force, and defensive capability over offensive dominance, reflecting humanity's evolved understanding of what was required to successfully engage kaiju-level threats. The mechanical monster that emerged from these principles possessed weapons systems that had been specifically tailored to exploit known vulnerabilities in Godzilla's biology, while incorporating defensive technologies that could withstand the atomic breath attacks that had destroyed so many previous opponents. The plasma grenade system that served as Super Mechagodzilla's primary offensive weapon represented a quantum leap in directed energy technology capable of delivering concentrated bursts of superheated matter that could penetrate even the toughest organic armor, while minimizing collateral damage to surrounding structures. These weapons had been developed through careful analysis of Godzilla's previous battles, identifying the precise energy levels and targeting requirements that would be necessary to inflict meaningful damage upon his incredibly durable physiology. The Mega Buster cannon that constituted the mechanical monster's most powerful armament was designed as the ultimate expression of human engineering applied to kaiju-scale combat, concentrating the combined power output of multiple fusion reactors into a coherent beam that could theoretically match or exceed the destructive potential of Godzilla's atomic breath. The development of this weapon had required breakthroughs in materials, science, energy storage, and targeting systems that pushed the boundaries of what human technology could achieve. The shock anchor cables that provided Super Mechagodzilla with both restraint and electrical attack capabilities demonstrated the tactical sophistication that human engineers had brought to the challenge of kaiju combat, creating weapons systems that could serve multiple functions while exploiting the specific characteristics of their intended target. These cables were designed not merely to immobilize opponents, but to deliver precisely calibrated electrical charges that could disrupt the bioelectric processes that powered Godzilla's atomic abilities. The combination system that allowed Garuda to merge with Super Mechagodzilla represented perhaps the most innovative aspect of the entire project, creating a transformation sequence that would provide the mechanical monster with enhanced capabilities, while demonstrating humanity's mastery of modular engineering and adaptive combat systems. This fusion process had been designed to be accomplished quickly under combat conditions, ensuring that tactical advantages could be gained without exposing either vehicle to unnecessary risk during the vulnerable transition period. The psychological warfare applications of Baby Godzilla's distress calls represented a morally complex aspect of UNGCC's strategy, exploiting the apparent emotional bonds that connected members of Godzilla's species while raising uncomfortable questions about the ethics of using innocent creatures as weapons against their own relatives. The infant's cries had been amplified and transmitted through sophisticated audio systems that could project the sounds across vast distances, creating a sonic lure that was designed to draw Godzilla into carefully prepared combat zones. The effectiveness of this psychological manipulation demonstrated that Godzilla possessed emotional capacities that had been previously unrecognized by human observers, while his predictable response to the infant's distress calls revealed tactical vulnerabilities that could be exploited by opponents who possessed sufficient knowledge of his behavioral patterns. Yet the success of this strategy came at the cost of traumatizing a young creature whose only crime had been to exist in a world where such innocent beings could be transformed into instruments of war. Rodan's unexpected intervention in the battle between Godzilla and Super Mechagodzilla introduced variables that no amount of strategic planning could have anticipated, as the Pteranodon's loyalty to his ancient ally created a 2-against-1 scenario that overwhelmed the mechanical monster's tactical programming. The flying reptile's arrival demonstrated that kaiju social relationships extended beyond simple species boundaries, creating alliances that were based on shared experience and mutual respect rather than genetic similarity. The aerial combat between Rodan and Garuda showcased the capabilities of both organic and artificial flying creatures, while their dogfight above Tokyo provided spectacular visual evidence of the technological progress that humanity had achieved in developing aircraft capable of engaging kaiju-level opponents on equal terms. Yet Rodan's eventual victory over the advanced interceptor demonstrated that millions of years of evolutionary refinement could still triumph over even the most sophisticated human engineering. The three-way battle that erupted when Rodan joined forces with Godzilla against Super Mechagodzilla represented the kind of complex tactical situation that the mechanical monster's programming had been designed to handle. Yet the coordination between the two organic kaiju exceeded the parameters that had been built into the artificial creature's behavioral algorithms. Their teamwork demonstrated intelligence and strategic thinking that challenged human assumptions about the cognitive capabilities of giant monsters. The damage that Super Mechagodzilla inflicted upon Godzilla during their initial confrontation was more severe than anything the Monster King had suffered in his previous battles, with the mechanical opponent's precisely targeted attacks, causing injuries that threatened to prove fatal if the engagement continued for much longer. The sight of Godzilla's blood flowing freely from wounds that refused to heal demonstrated that human technology had finally achieved the capability to match kaiju-level durability with artificial alternatives. The shock anchor cables that penetrated Godzilla's hide and delivered massive electrical charges directly into his nervous system represented the closest that any opponent had come to achieving a decisive victory over the Monster King, while the mechanical precision with which these attacks were delivered showed that Super Mechagodzilla possessed tactical capabilities that exceeded those of any previous artificial opponent. The electrical assault that followed these successful penetrations threatened to shut down the biological processes that powered Godzilla's atomic abilities. Baby Godzilla's instinctive response to witnessing Godzilla's distress provided the battle with its most emotionally powerful moment, as the infant creature's cries of alarm and concern demonstrated that familial bonds could transcend the artificial barriers that humans had created to separate research subjects from their natural relatives. The young monster's obvious distress at seeing his elder kinsman suffering under the mechanical opponent's assault revealed depths of emotional sophistication that challenged every assumption about kaiju psychology. The transformation of baby Godzilla into little Godzilla that resulted from exposure to Rodan's radioactive life force represented a biological process that exceeded human understanding of growth and development, while the infant's newly acquired atomic abilities provided him with the power to influence the outcome of battles that had seemed beyond his capacity to effect. This rapid maturation demonstrated that members of Godzilla's species possessed adaptive capabilities that could be triggered by environmental pressures or emotional trauma. The atomic pulse that little Godzilla directed toward his wounded elder provided Godzilla with the energy transfusion that was necessary to revive his failing biological systems, while demonstrating that kaiju possessed methods of mutual support that operated according to principles that human science had never documented or understood. This transfer of life force between family members revealed social and biological relationships that existed far beyond the simple predator-prey dynamics that researchers had assumed governed kaiju interactions. Godzilla's revival and subsequent destruction of Super Mechagodzilla was accomplished not through brute force alone, but through the kind of strategic thinking that indicated genuine intelligence rather than mere instinctive behavior, as the Monster King systematically targeted the mechanical opponent's vulnerable systems while protecting himself from the artificial creature's most dangerous weapons. His victory was achieved through accumulated battle experience and tactical learning that no programming could replicate. The final destruction of Super Mechagodzilla was staged as both spectacular climax and sobering reminder that even humanity's most sophisticated technological achievements remained vulnerable to opponents who possessed the combination of raw power and genuine intelligence that characterized the greatest of the kaiju. The mechanical monster's death demonstrated that artificial intelligence, however sophisticated, could not replace the kind of adaptive thinking that had been refined through millions of years of evolutionary pressure. The aftermath of the battle saw both Godzilla and little Godzilla departing for the oceanic depths that served as their natural habitat, their relationship having been transformed by shared combat and mutual support into something that resembled a genuine family bond rather than mere species recognition. Their peaceful withdrawal from human territories demonstrated that kaiju aggression was typically defensive rather than expansionist, directed toward protecting their interests rather than conquering human civilization. The lessons that UNGCC learned from Super Mechagodzilla's defeat would influence all subsequent attempts to develop artificial kaiju, while the battle's demonstration of genuine emotional connections between giant monsters would force researchers to reconsider their assumptions about kaiju intelligence and social organization. The recognition that these creatures possessed family relationships and emotional complexity would eventually lead to more sophisticated approaches to kaiju management that acknowledged their autonomy rather than treating them as simple threats to be eliminated. The technological innovations that had been developed for the Super Mechagodzilla project would find applications in numerous civilian and military contexts, while the international cooperation that had made the project possible would serve as a model for future collaborative responses to global threats. Yet the ultimate failure of the mechanical monster would also serve as a cautionary tale about the limitations of technological solutions to problems that possessed biological and emotional dimensions that engineering could not address. The shift from viewing Mechagodzilla as an alien weapon to understanding it as a human-built defender represented a fundamental change in humanity's relationship with artificial kaiju, while the creature's defeat demonstrated that even the most benevolent intentions could not guarantee success when the beings they sought to protect or control possessed capabilities that exceeded human understanding. The legacy of Super Mechagodzilla would influence decades of subsequent research into human kaiju relations, while serving as a permanent reminder that some forces could be channeled but never truly controlled. In the dawn of the 21st century, When Japan had begun to rebuild both its physical infrastructure and its collective confidence, after the devastating kaiju attacks that had marked the closing decades of the previous millennium, the nation found itself confronting a philosophical and technological challenge that would test every assumption about the proper relationship between the living and the dead, between respect for the past and the demands of an uncertain future. The bones of the original Godzilla, the creature whose rampage through Tokyo in 1954 had first introduced the world to the reality of radioactive monsters, lay preserved in a secret facility where they had rested undisturbed for nearly half a century, serving as both monument to humanity's first encounter with kaiju terror and repository of genetic information that scientists were only beginning to understand. The Japan Self-Defense Force's decision to construct a new mechanical defender using these sacred remains represented both a pragmatic response to continuing kaiju threats and a profound violation of the reverence that had traditionally been accorded to the dead, particularly those whose deaths had carried such enormous significance for the nation's understanding of its place in a world where atomic weapons could create monsters as easily as they could destroy cities. The project that would eventually produce Kiryu, the most sophisticated mechanical kaiju ever constructed by human science, began with the uncomfortable recognition that previous attempts to create artificial defenders had failed because they lacked the organic components that gave natural monsters their extraordinary resilience and adaptive capabilities. The scientific team that undertook this unprecedented fusion of bone and metal was led by researchers who had spent their careers studying the biological mechanisms that allowed kaiju to survive injuries that would prove fatal to any conventional creature, while their engineering colleagues had developed construction techniques that could integrate organic materials with mechanical systems in ways that preserved the beneficial characteristics of both. The challenge they faced exceeded anything that had been attempted in the history of either biology or engineering, requiring innovations that pushed the boundaries of human knowledge, while raising ethical questions that had no clear answers. The skeleton that served as Kiryu's foundation carried within its calcium matrix not merely the physical structure that had supported the original Godzilla's massive frame, but genetic information that had been preserved through decades of careful storage and cellular memories that had somehow survived the creature's death. The discovery that these bones retained traces of the radioactive energies that had once flowed through the monster's living tissues provided the project with both unprecedented opportunities and dangers that exceeded anything the designers had anticipated when they first conceived the idea of combining organic and artificial components. Akane Yashiro's recruitment as Kiryu's primary pilot represented more than a simple personnel decision, but a recognition that operating such a sophisticated machine would require not only technical expertise, but the kind of intuitive understanding that could bridge the gap between human consciousness and the alien intelligence that might still reside within the mechanical creature's organic components. Her background as a Type 90 Maser tank operator had provided her with experience in engaging kaiju targets under combat conditions, yet nothing in her training had prepared her for the psychological challenges that would emerge when she found herself psychically linked to a machine that possessed traces of genuine monster consciousness. The development of Kiryu's control systems required innovations in human-machine interface technology that had been previously considered purely theoretical, creating neural pathways that could transmit not only conscious commands but subconscious responses and emotional states between pilot and mechanical creature. These connections were designed to enhance combat effectiveness by allowing instantaneous coordination between human strategic thinking and mechanical capabilities. Yet they also created vulnerabilities that no amount of testing could fully anticipate or prepare for. The absolute zero cannon that served as Kiryu's ultimate weapon represented humanity's most ambitious attempt to harness the fundamental forces of physics for kaiju-scale combat, creating a device that could theoretically reduce any target to absolute zero temperature while flash freezing everything within a precisely defined area of effect. The development of this weapon had required breakthroughs in thermodynamics and energy containment that pushed the boundaries of what human science could achieve, while its deployment carried risks that could threaten not only intended targets but the surrounding environment, and even the machine that fired it. The first activation of Kiryu's systems provided the construction team with their initial indication that they had created something far more complex than a simple mechanical weapon, as the creature's responses to basic commands carried overtones of personality and autonomous decision-making that exceeded anything that had been programmed into its artificial intelligence systems. The discovery that the original Godzilla's consciousness had somehow survived within the preserved skeletal structure transformed what had been conceived as a construction project into something approaching resurrection, with all the moral and practical complications that such a process entailed. The awakening of genetic memories within Kiryu's organic components created a crisis of identity that manifested itself through increasingly erratic behavior as the mechanical creature struggled to reconcile its programmed mission to protect humanity with the instinctive hostilities that had driven the original Godzilla's attacks upon human civilization. These internal conflicts would eventually escalate into open rebellion as the sleeping consciousness within the machine began to assert control over systems that had been designed to serve human purposes rather than monster imperatives. The three-dimensional battle that erupted across Tokyo when Kiryu's organic consciousness overwhelmed its mechanical programming provided the city's inhabitants with a terrifying glimpse of what could happen when humanity's most sophisticated defensive systems turned against their creators, while the mechanical creature's rampage through the metropolitan area demonstrated that artificial kaiju could be even more destructive than their natural counterparts when they were driven by confused memories and conflicting loyalties. Akane's desperate attempts to regain control over her mechanical partner during this initial crisis revealed both the strength of the neural bonds that had been established between pilot and machine and the fundamental impossibility of completely controlling consciousness that had been shaped by experiences that no human could fully understand or anticipate. Her psychological connection to Kiryu allowed her to sense the creature's internal struggles while providing her with limited influence over its actions. Yet these same connections exposed her to emotional and sensory experiences that challenged her sanity and sense of self. The intervention that finally restored Kiryu to operational status required not merely technical repairs, but a form of psychological counseling that acknowledged the mechanical creature's emerging consciousness while establishing boundaries that would allow it to function as a defensive weapon, without completely suppressing the organic intelligence that had made it so formidable. This delicate balance between control and autonomy would define every subsequent interaction between Kiryu and its human operators, creating a relationship that was more partnership than simple command structure. The return of Godzilla to Tokyo Bay provided Kiryu with its first opportunity to fulfill its designed purpose while confronting the mechanical creature with the ultimate test of its divided loyalties, as it faced an opponent who shared not only its species' origins, but many of the same genetic characteristics that had been preserved within its skeletal structure. The battle between these two representatives of the Godzilla lineage carried symbolic weight that extended far beyond simple combat, representing a conflict between past and present, natural and artificial, organic consciousness and mechanical purpose. The combat that followed demonstrated both Kiryu's superior technological capabilities and the psychological complexities that arose when artificial creatures were forced to battle opponents with whom they shared fundamental biological connections. The mechanical Godzilla's weapon systems proved highly effective against its organic counterpart. Yet, the creature's responses to damage and tactical situations revealed decision-making processes that incorporated both programmed behaviors and instinctive reactions that had never been installed by human engineers. The Absolute Zero cannon's deployment against Godzilla represented the culmination of humanity's technological response to kaiju threats. Yet the weapon's effects demonstrated both the awesome power that human science could wield and the terrible costs that such power could exact upon those who chose to employ it. The flash freezing effect that the cannon produced created a zone of absolute cold that threatened not only its intended target, but the surrounding environment and even the mechanical creature that had fired it. Godzilla's survival of the Absolute Zero attack, though he was severely injured and temporarily incapacitated, proved that even humanity's most advanced weapons could not guarantee victory against opponents whose biological systems had been refined through millions of years of evolutionary pressure and decades of exposure to radioactive energies that had transformed them into something beyond conventional understanding. His eventual recovery and escape demonstrated that technological superiority alone could not overcome the fundamental resilience that characterized genuine kaiju. The psychological aftermath of this first battle left both Akane and Kiryu forever changed by their shared experience of combat against a creature that represented their opponent's origins, while serving as a reminder of the organic consciousness that resided within the mechanical frame. The neural connections that had been established between pilot and machine had transmitted not only tactical information but emotional responses and sensory experiences that would influence all their future interactions with kaiju and each other. The appearance of Mothra in the sequel that followed represented both escalation of the kaiju crisis and introduction of moral complexities that challenged every assumption about the proper relationship between humanity and the giant creatures that shared their world. The Divine Moth's arrival in Tokyo was motivated not by territorial aggression or simple instinct, but by a sophisticated understanding of the ethical implications of using the remains of the dead as weapons against the living, creating a situation where humanity found themselves opposed, not only by monsters, but by forces that possessed genuine moral authority. Mothra's demand for the return of Godzilla's bones to their proper resting place represented more than simple sentiment, but a recognition that some boundaries should not be crossed regardless of the practical advantages that such transgressions might provide. The Moth's willingness to risk her own life and the lives of her offspring to ensure that the dead were treated with appropriate respect demonstrated that kaiju possessed ethical frameworks that often exceeded those of the humans who claimed moral superiority over them. The alliance that developed between Mothra and Godzilla against their common mechanical opponent created a 2-against-1 scenario that overwhelmed Kiryu's tactical capabilities, while forcing the mechanical creature to confront the fundamental isolation that resulted from its pain's artificial nature. The coordination between the two organic kaiju demonstrated social and communication abilities that the mechanical creature could observe but never fully share, while their obvious concern for each other's welfare highlighted the emotional connections that Kiryu would never experience with others of its kind. The three-way battle that erupted across Tokyo showcased the capabilities of each participant while revealing the complex web of loyalties and obligations that connected not only the monsters to each other but the humans who found themselves caught between competing ethical imperatives and practical necessities. Akane's growing understanding of Kiryu's consciousness forced her to question whether using the mechanical creature as a weapon represented a form of slavery, while her emotional attachment to her mechanical partner complicated every decision about its deployment and tactical employment. The final confrontation between Kiryu and Godzilla was resolved not through superior firepower or tactical advantage, but through the mechanical creature's autonomous decision to prioritize the ethical treatment of the dead over its NUC's programmed obligations to human authority, demonstrating that artificial consciousness could develop moral frameworks that might conflict with its creator's intentions. Kiryu's choice to carry the wounded Godzilla away from populated areas and return with him to the oceanic depths represented both the fulfillment of Mothra's demands and the assertion of independent moral agency that transcended its original programming. The mechanical creature's final message to Akane, as it departed for the depths, expressed both gratitude for her companionship and regret for the burden that their neural connection had placed upon her human consciousness. While its decision to sacrifice itself for the protection of both humanity and the kaiju world demonstrated that artificial beings could achieve moral sophistication that equaled or exceeded that of their creators. The image of Kiryu carrying Godzilla into the depths served as both spectacular conclusion to their shared story and symbolic representation of the possibility for reconciliation between natural and artificial forms of life. The technological legacy of the Kiryu project would influence all subsequent attempts to create mechanical kaiju, while the ethical questions that its consciousness had raised would continue to challenge researchers and policymakers who faced decisions about the proper limits of scientific ambition and technological development. The recognition that artificial creatures could develop genuine consciousness and moral agency would eventually lead to international agreements governing the creation and deployment of mechanical kaiju, while the memory of Kiryu's sacrifice would serve as a permanent reminder that some achievements in science and engineering carried responsibilities that exceeded their immediate practical applications. The modern special effects techniques that brought Kiryu to life on screen represented a quantum leap in the sophistication and realism that could be achieved through the combination of traditional practical effects with computer-generated imagery, while the mechanical creature's design successfully integrated classic kaiju aesthetics with contemporary technological imagery. The result was a creature that appeared both familiar and revolutionary, honoring the traditions that had defined the kaiju genre, while pushing the boundaries of what such creatures could represent in terms of both spectacle and philosophical complexity. In the year 2018, when the boundaries between reality and digital fantasy had become increasingly blurred by technologies that could create worlds more vivid and immersive than anything previous generations had ever imagined possible, the legacy of Mechagodzilla found itself transported into a realm where the impossible became routine, and the dreams of countless fans could be realized through the magic of virtual reality systems that had transformed entertainment into something approaching genuine alternate existence. The OASIS, a sprawling digital universe that had grown to encompass virtually every aspect of human, social, economic, and cultural activity, represented both the ultimate achievement of computer science and the most comprehensive escape from the increasingly dystopian realities that characterize life in the physical world. Wade Watts, whose avatar Parzival had become one of the most recognizable figures in the virtual landscape, found himself thrust into the final confrontation of a contest that would determine not merely his personal fortune, but the future of human civilization itself, as corporate forces led by innovative online industries sought to transform the democratic chaos of the OASIS into a controlled environment where every interaction would be monitored, regulated, and monetized according to principles that prioritize profit over the creative freedom that had made the virtual world such a revolutionary force in human culture. The appearance of Mechagodzilla as the ultimate weapon in this digital conflict represented both homage to the mechanical monster's decades of cinematic terror and recognition that certain archetypes possessed such fundamental power that they could transcend their original context to become symbols that resonated across entirely different forms of media and storytelling. Steven Spielberg's decision to include the mechanical kaiju in his adaptation of Ernest Cline's novel demonstrated both his personal appreciation for the Japanese monster films that had influenced his own career and his understanding that contemporary audiences would recognize the significance of deploying such an iconic antagonist as the final obstacle between heroes and victory. Nolan Sorrento's piloting of the mechanical monster served as both practical plot device and symbolic representation of corporate power, attempting to crush individual creativity and democratic participation through the deployment of overwhelming technological force that had been designed not to inspire wonder, but to eliminate opposition through brute destruction. The IOI executive's connection to Mechagodzilla transformed him from mere corporate villain into something approaching a force of nature, albeit one that served artificial rather than organic imperatives. The digital recreation of Mechagodzilla that emerged within the Oasis possessed all the visual and functional characteristics that had made the mechanical monster such an enduring icon of kaiju cinema, while the unlimited possibilities of virtual reality allowed for enhancements and capabilities that would have been impossible to achieve through practical effects or even conventional computer-generated imagery. The creature that terrorized the digital landscape combined the classic silver aesthetic that had defined the original 1974 design with modern interpretations of mechanical functionality that reflected contemporary understanding of robotics and artificial intelligence. The scale of destruction that Mechagodzilla unleashed within the virtual environment exceeded anything that had been depicted in his previous cinematic appearances, as the digital realm's malleable nature allowed for spectacular devastation that could be rendered in perfect detail without the constraints that had limited previous filmmakers' ability to showcase the full extent of kaiju-level destruction. Cities could be obliterated with photorealistic precision, while rebuilding themselves instantly for the next wave of attacks, creating a playground for destruction that satisfied audiences' desire for spectacle without the moral complications that would arise from depicting genuine human suffering. The weapons systems that Mechagodzilla deployed against his digital opponents incorporated both classic elements from his cinematic heritage and new capabilities that had been specifically designed for the virtual environment, creating a creature that was both nostalgically familiar and surprisingly innovative in its tactical approaches to combat. The rainbow beams that had served as his signature attack in the original films were rendered with spectacular visual effects that exceeded anything that 70s filmmakers could have imagined, while new armaments took advantage of the digital realm's physics to create attacks that would have been impossible in the physical world. The battle between Parzival and Mechagodzilla represented more than simple conflict between protagonist and antagonist, but served as a metaphor for the broader struggle between individual creativity and corporate control that formed the fame's thematic core of the entire narrative. While the mechanical monster's role as the ultimate expression of IOI's power demonstrated how easily technological advancement could be perverted to serve oppressive rather than liberating purposes. The contest between human ingenuity and mechanical overwhelming force played out according to patterns that had been established through decades of kaiju cinema, while incorporating contemporary concerns about corporate dominance and the commodification of culture. The High Five's coordinated assault against Mechagodzilla showcased both the power of collaborative effort and the importance of friendship and loyalty in overcoming obstacles that seemed insurmountable when faced by individuals acting alone, while their diverse approaches to the challenge reflected the different strengths and perspectives that each character brought to their shared struggle against corporate tyranny. The battle demonstrated that even the most powerful artificial opponents could be defeated through teamwork, creativity, and the willingness to sacrifice individual glory for collective success. The computer-generated imagery that brought Mechagodzilla to life in Ready Player One represented the culmination of decades of advancement in digital effects technology, creating a creature that possessed both the weight and presence of practical effects and the spectacular capabilities that only computer animation could provide. The mechanical monster's movements conveyed both massive scale and precise mechanical function, while his interactions with the virtual environment demonstrated the seamless integration of digital characters with computer-generated settings that had become possible through modern filmmaking techniques. The nostalgic appeal that Mechagodzilla's appearance generated among audiences reflected both the character's iconic status within popular culture and the broader phenomenon of adults seeking to reconnect with the entertainment that had shaped their childhood experiences, while younger viewers were introduced to a character whose significance they might not have fully understood, but whose visual impact was immediately apparent. The mechanical monster's inclusion in the film served as both crowd-pleasing fan service and effective storytelling device that advanced the plot while satisfying audience expectations. The cultural significance of Mechagodzilla's appearance in Ready Player One extended far beyond the immediate context of the film itself, representing the growing recognition that Japanese popular culture had become a global phenomenon whose influence could be found in entertainment produced around the world. The mechanical monster's presence in a major Hollywood production demonstrated the international appeal of kaiju characters while introducing them to audiences who might never have encountered the original films in which they had first appeared. The symbolic representation of Mechagodzilla as the embodiment of corporate mechanization and the suppression of individual creativity resonated with contemporary anxieties about the increasing dominance of technology companies in everyday life, while the creature's ultimate defeat provided reassurance that human values and democratic principles could still triumph over the dehumanizing forces that threatened to reduce all human activity to profitable data streams. The mechanical monster's role as final boss reflected both video game conventions and deeper cultural concerns about the relationship between technology and humanity. The impact that Ready Player One's use of Mechagodzilla had upon the character's global recognition was immediately apparent in the increased interest that audiences showed in both the original Godzilla films and the broader kaiju genre, while merchandising opportunities that arose from the mechanical monster's Hollywood appearance demonstrated the commercial potential that existed when iconic characters were successfully adapted for new media and international coursed markets. The film's success helped to establish Mechagodzilla as a character whose appeal extended far beyond his original Japanese context. The technical achievement that the digital Mechagodzilla represented in terms of character animation and visual effects integration provided other filmmakers with examples of how classic monster designs could be successfully updated for contemporary audiences while maintaining the essential characteristics that had made them memorable in the first place. The balance between nostalgic authenticity and modern innovation that the Ready Player One version achieved became a template for subsequent adaptations of classic characters in new contexts. The philosophical questions that Mechagodzilla's appearance in Ready Player One raised about the relationship between original creative works and their subsequent adaptations reflected broader debates within fan communities about the proper balance between respect for source material and the creative freedom that was necessary for successful translation between different media formats. The mechanical monster's successful transition from practical effects, kaiju cinema, to computer-generated blockbuster entertainment demonstrated that iconic characters could maintain their essential appeal while adapting to new technological and cultural contexts. The influence that Steven Spielberg's direction had upon the portrayal of Mechagodzilla in Ready Player One reflected both his personal appreciation for the craftsmanship that had characterized the original Godzilla films and his understanding of how to adapt foreign cultural elements for American audiences without losing the essential qualities that had made them significant in their original context. His treatment of the mechanical monster demonstrated the respect and attention to detail that was necessary for successful cross-cultural adaptation of iconic characters. The legacy of Mechagodzilla's appearance in Ready Player One would continue to influence subsequent adaptations of kaiju characters in international productions. While the film's success demonstrated that audiences around the world were eager to embrace characters and concepts that had originated in Japanese popular culture, the mechanical monster's Hollywood debut served as both validation of the global appeal of kaiju characters and encouragement for further international collaborations that would introduce these iconic creatures to new generations of fans. The integration of Mechagodzilla into the larger pop culture landscape that Ready Player One represented demonstrated how characters that had been created for specific cultural contexts could evolve to become universal symbols that transcended their original boundaries while maintaining the essential characteristics that had made them meaningful to their first audiences. The mechanical monster's presence in the film served as both nostalgic callback and contemporary statement about the enduring power of well-designed characters to capture imaginations across cultural and generational divides. The success of Ready Player One's use of Mechagodzilla as a climactic antagonist provided other filmmakers with evidence that audiences were receptive to the inclusion of kaiju characters in non-kaiju contexts. While the positive reception that the mechanical monster received from both critics and general audiences demonstrated that these iconic creatures possessed sufficient cultural significance to justify their inclusion in major international productions, the film's achievement in successfully integrating Mechagodzilla into a science fiction adventure story opened new possibilities for future appearances of kaiju characters in unexpected contexts. In the year 2021, when humanity had grown accustomed to sharing their world with titans whose very existence challenged every assumption about the natural order and the balance of power between civilization and the primordial forces that had shaped the sieve, Earth since its creation, the corporate architects of technological supremacy found themselves confronting the ultimate question of whether artificial intelligence could succeed, where human ambition had repeatedly failed in achieving dominion over creatures whose origins stretched back to ages when gods and monsters walked. The Earth as Equals, Apex Cybernetics, the multinational corporation whose research facilities had been constructed in the shadow of previous kaiju encounters and whose ambitious projects had been funded by governments, desperate to find technological solutions to threats that conventional military might have proven incapable of addressing, represented the culmination of decades of accumulated knowledge about both the biological mechanisms that powered Titan physiology and the engineering principles that would be necessary to create artificial equivalents capable of matching their awesome capabilities. The hollow Earth energy that had been discovered beneath the planet's surface during Kong's expedition to the subterranean realm that had served as his ancestral home provided Apex with the power source that had been missing from all previous attempts to create mechanized titans. While the revelations about the ancient civilization that had once thrived in those depths offered tantalizing glimpses of technologies that had been developed by beings whose understanding of the relationship between organic and artificial life had exceeded anything that modern science had yet achieved. Walter Simmons, the visionary industrialist, whose leadership of Apex had transformed the corporation from a conventional defense contractor into the world's most advanced developer of anti-Titan technologies, possessed both the financial resources and the ruthless determination that would be necessary to undertake a project whose scope and complexity exceeded anything that had been previously attempted by human engineering. While his willingness to ignore ethical considerations and safety protocols in pursuit of his ultimate goal demonstrated the dangerous combination of brilliance and hubris that had characterized so many previous antagonists in the ongoing saga of humanity's relationship with forces beyond their comprehension. The skull of King Ghidorah, that served as the neurological foundation for Apex's mechanical titan, represented both a triumph of battlefield salvage operations and a profound violation of the natural order, as the three-headed dragon's remains carried within their fossilized structure not merely the biological templates that had enabled the alien destroyer to achieve his terrible capabilities, but traces of the malevolent consciousness that had driven his campaign of planetary annihilation. Across multiple worlds and geological epochs, Ren Serizawa's recruitment as the primary pilot for the mechanical Titan reflected both his expertise in Titan biology, inherited from his father's groundbreaking research, and his personal desire to prove that human technology could succeed where natural evolution had created beings whose power seemed to mock every achievement of civilization and industry. While his willingness to undergo the neural interfacing procedures that would connect his consciousness directly to the artificial creature's control systems demonstrated the profound personal risks that individuals were prepared to accept in pursuit of humanity's technological transcendence. The construction of Mechagodzilla within Apex's hidden facilities represented the most ambitious engineering project in human history, requiring innovations in materials science, energy systems, artificial intelligence, and biomechanical integration that pushed the boundaries of multiple scientific disciplines, while creating a creature whose capabilities would theoretically exceed those of any natural Titan through the application of directed intelligence, rather than instinctive behavior patterns that had been shaped by millions of years of environmental pressure and evolutionary development. The neural interface technology that connected Ren's human consciousness to Ghidorah's alien neural pathways created a hybrid intelligence that possessed both the strategic thinking capabilities of human cognition and the predatory instincts that had made the three-headed destroyer the most feared creature in the known galaxy. While the gradual erosion of Ren's individual identity under the influence of the alien consciousness demonstrated that some forms of technological advancement carried prices that exceeded any potential benefits they might provide. The hollow earth energy that powered Mechagodzilla's systems provided the mechanical Titan with capabilities that had been impossible to achieve through conventional power sources, while the alien technology that had been reverse engineered from Ghidorah's remains enabled the artificial creature to access abilities that no purely human-designed machine could have possessed, creating a fusion of terrestrial engineering and extraterrestrial science that represented both humanity's greatest technological achievement and their most dangerous gamble. The decision to deploy Mechagodzilla against Godzilla during the Alpha Titan's confrontation with Kong in Hong Kong demonstrated Apex's confidence in their creation's capabilities while revealing the extent to which corporate arrogance had blinded them to the potential consequences of unleashing forces that they understood imperfectly and controlled even less completely. as the mechanical titan's activation within one of the world's most densely populated urban areas showed callous disregard for civilian casualties in pursuit of their ultimate goal of establishing technological supremacy over natural titans. The rampage that erupted when Ghidorah's consciousness successfully asserted control over Mechagodzilla's systems transformed what had been conceived as humanity's ultimate defensive weapon into an instrument of destruction that exceeded even the three-headed dragon's original capacity for mayhem. As the mechanical titan's advanced weaponry and unlimited energy supply enabled it to lay waste to urban infrastructure with an efficiency that no organic creature could have matched despite their impressive destructive capabilities. The neon-lit destruction that Mechagodzilla unleashed upon Hong Kong's skyline provided audiences with spectacular visual evidence of the mechanical titan's capabilities, while serving as a grim reminder that humanity's most sophisticated technologies could be turned against their creators when those technologies incorporated elements that possessed their own agendas and motivations. As the alien consciousness that had once sought to remake entire worlds according to its vision of perfect order demonstrated that death had not diminished its hostility toward all forms of life that refused to acknowledge its supremacy. Godzilla's arrival to confront the mechanical imposter that bore his name represented both the Alpha Titan's instinctive response to a territorial challenge and his recognition that this artificial creature posed threats that extended far beyond simple competition for dominance. As the king of the monster's immediate hostility toward Mechagodzilla demonstrated that natural titans possessed sensory capabilities that allowed them to recognize the alien consciousness that drove the mechanical creature's brass actions, even when human observers remained unaware of the true nature of the threat they faced. The battle between atomic breath and mechanical might that erupted across Hong Kong's urban landscape showcased both combatants' extraordinary capabilities, while revealing fundamental differences in their approaches to mostly combat, as Godzilla's instinctive fighting style, based upon millions of years of evolutionary development, clashed with Mechagodzilla's calculated tactical responses that had been programmed by human engineers, but were now being guided by an intelligence that possessed eons of experience in destroying civilizations across the galaxy. The mechanical titan's ability to absorb and redirect Godzilla's atomic energy demonstrated technological capabilities that exceeded anything that had been achieved in previous iterations of artificial kaiju, while the creature's adaptive combat systems allowed it to learn from each exchange and develop countermeasures that exploited weaknesses in Godzilla's fighting style that the Alpha Titan had never been forced to address during his previous encounters with more conventional opponents. Kong's dramatic arrival during the climactic moments of the battle between the organic and mechanical titans introduced variables that no tactical planning could have anticipated, as the giant ape's unique combination of intelligence, agility, and raw strength created opportunities for collaborative assault that neither combatant could have achieved through individual effort, while his obvious concern for human welfare demonstrated that some titans possessed moral frameworks that included protection of creatures they recognized as innocent, rather than merely seeking dominance over potential rivals. The alliance that developed between Godzilla and Kong against their common mechanical enemy represented a fundamental shift in the relationship between these two Alpha Titans, as their shared recognition of the existential threat that Mechagodzilla posed to all natural life overcame the territorial conflicts that had driven their previous confrontations, while their coordinated attacks demonstrated communication abilities and strategic thinking that exceeded anything that human observers had previously documented in Titan behavior patterns. The three-way confrontation that erupted when Kong joined the battle against Mechagodzilla showcased each participant's unique capabilities while revealing the fundamental differences between organic intelligence that had been shaped by natural selection and artificial consciousness that had been designed to serve specific purposes, as the two natural titans' ability to adapt their tactics in response to changing circumstances proved superior to the mechanical creature's programmed responses, despite its obvious technological advantages. The moment when Kong wielded his ancestral battle axe against Mechagodzilla represented both a connection to the ancient civilization that had once fought similar battles in the Hollow Earth and demonstration that organic creativity could still find ways to overcome technological superiority when, guided by intelligence that had been refined through generations of environmental pressure, while the weapon's ability to channel and redirect energy attacks transformed Kong from primarily physical combatant into something approaching Godzilla's equal in terms of destructive capability. The systematic destruction of Mechagodzilla that resulted from the coordinated assault by both natural titans was achieved not merely through superior numbers but through the kind of tactical innovation that artificial intelligence could observe and analyze, but never truly replicate, as the organic combatants demonstrated problem-solving abilities that drew upon intuition and creative thinking, rather than the logical processes that governed even the most sophisticated mechanical systems. The final dismemberment of Mechagodzilla served as both spectacular climax to the battle and symbolic representation of natural order, reasserting itself over artificial attempts to improve upon evolutionary designs that had already achieved optimal functionality through millions of years of development and refinement, while the mechanical titan's destruction demonstrated that even the most advanced technologies remained vulnerable to opponents who possessed genuine intelligence rather than merely sophisticated programming. Ghidorah's consciousness, which had briefly achieved a form of technological resurrection through its integration with Apex's mechanical systems, was finally and definitively eliminated through the physical destruction of the artificial body that had provided it with the means to influence the physical world, while the alien intelligence's final defeat ensured that this particular threat to planetary stability had been neutralized permanently, rather than merely contained until future technological developments might provide it with new opportunities for manifestation. The aftermath of Mechagodzilla's destruction saw both Godzilla and Kong acknowledging each other's territories and spheres of influence in ways that suggested a fundamental restructuring of Titan hierarchy based upon mutual respect rather than simple dominance relationships, while their peaceful separation demonstrated that conflicts between alpha predators could be resolved through shared combat experience rather than requiring the elimination of perceived rivals. The collapse of Apex Cybernetics following the catastrophic failure of their flagship project represented both justice for the corporate arrogance that had endangered millions of innocent lives and warning about the dangers inherent in attempting to weaponize forces that humanity understood incompletely, while the legal and financial consequences that befell the corporation's leadership served as deterrent to future attempts to create artificial titans. Without adequate consideration of the ethical and practical implications of such undertakings, the technological legacy of the Mechagodzilla project would influence subsequent research into Titan biology and mechanical engineering for decades to come, while the lessons learned from the creature's brief but devastating rampage would inform international policies governing the development and deployment of artificial kaiju, as governments around the world recognized that some forms of technological advancement required oversight and regulation that exceeded the capabilities of individual corporations or national authorities. The hollow Earth energy that had powered Mechagodzilla's systems remained available for more benevolent applications, while the knowledge gained through studying Titan neural architecture would eventually contribute to advances in medical technology and artificial intelligence. that could benefit humanity without creating existential threats to planetary stability, demonstrating that even failed projects could yield valuable insights when their lessons were properly understood and applied by researchers who possessed appropriate respect for the forces they sought to harness. The modern interpretation of classic kaiju themes that Godzilla vs. Kong achieved through its portrayal of Mechagodzilla demonstrated that contemporary filmmakers could successfully update traditional monster movie concepts for 21st century audiences while maintaining the essential philosophical and emotional elements that had made these stories resonant across multiple generations. As the mechanical titan's role as ultimate expression of technological hubris connected directly to concerns about artificial intelligence and corporate power that characterized modern anxieties about the direction of human civilization, the establishment of Mechagodzilla as a credible threat within the MonsterVerse continuity opened possibilities for future appearances of the mechanical titan or similar artificial creatures in subsequent films, while the success of the character's integration into the broader narrative framework demonstrated that audiences remained receptive to stories that explored the relationship between natural and artificial forms of life through spectacular action sequences and sophisticated character development that honored both entertainment value and thematic depth. In the decades that followed Mechagodzilla's emergence from the creative laboratories of Toho Studios and his subsequent evolution through multiple incarnations across different eras of filmmaking, technology, and storytelling, sophistication, the mechanical monster transcended his original role as mere cinematic antagonist to become a cultural phenomenon whose influence extended far beyond the boundaries of any single film or franchise, embedding himself within the collective consciousness of global popular culture in ways that few fictional characters had ever achieved, and establishing himself as an archetype whose symbolic resonance would continue to evolve alongside humanity's changing relationship with technology and artificial intelligence. The transformation of Mechagodzilla from Japanese kaiju to international icon represented more than simple cultural export, but reflected fundamental shifts in how audiences around the world understood and responded to stories about the relationship between natural and artificial forms of life. While his appearances in multiple media formats demonstrated the character's remarkable adaptability to different storytelling contexts and technological presentation methods that allowed each generation to rediscover his appeal through the lens of their own contemporary concerns and anxieties about technological development. The merchandising empire that grew around Mechagodzilla's image provided tangible evidence of his cultural penetration as toy manufacturers, clothing designers, and collectible producers recognized that the mechanical monster's distinctive appearance and symbolic associations made him an ideal candidate for commercial exploitation that could satisfy both nostalgic adults seeking connections to their childhood experiences and contemporary consumers who appreciated the character's aesthetic and thematic sophistication, even without detailed knowledge of his cinematic origins. The toy lines that featured Mechagodzilla demonstrated the character's particular appeal to collectors and enthusiasts who valued both the craftsmanship required to recreate his intricate mechanical details and the nostalgic connections that such representations provided to the films where they had first encountered the mechanical monster. While the evolution of these products, from simple vinyl figures to sophisticated electronic models with lights, sounds, and articulated features reflected both advances in manufacturing technology and the growing sophistication of consumer expectations for licensed merchandise. The collectible market that developed around Mechagodzilla memorabilia created communities of enthusiasts whose shared appreciation for the character fostered international connections between collectors who might otherwise have had little in common beyond their fascination with the mechanical. Kaiju, while the premium prices that rare or limited edition items could command, demonstrated the depth of emotional investment that fans were willing to make in preserving and celebrating the character's legacy across multiple decades of cultural evolution. Video game appearances provided Mechagodzilla with opportunities to engage with audiences in interactive contexts that allowed players to experience the character's power and capabilities from perspectives that passive media consumption could never provide, while his inclusion in fighting games, strategy simulations, and action adventures demonstrated the versatility of his concept across different gaming genres and mechanical gameplay systems that required different approaches to representing his abilities and personality. The fighting game implementations that featured Mechagodzilla as a playable character required developers to translate his cinematic capabilities into mechanical systems that could provide satisfying gameplay while maintaining the essential characteristics that made him recognizable and appealing to fans. While his various movesets and special abilities reflected different interpretations of how his weapons systems and combat strategies might function when controlled by human players, rather than following predetermined narrative scripts. Strategy games that included Mechagodzilla as a unit or faction allowed players to explore the tactical and strategic implications of deploying mechanical kaiju in large-scale conflicts. While his role in such games often reflected the broader themes about technological advancement and artificial intelligence that had characterized his cinematic appearances, creating gameplay experiences that reinforced his symbolic associations while providing entertainment value through strategic depth and complexity. The influence that Mechagodzilla exerted upon other mecha designs in popular culture could be observed across multiple media formats and international boundaries, as creators of giant robots, mechanical monsters, and artificial beings drew inspiration from his visual design, symbolic associations, and narrative functions. When developing their own original characters and concepts, while his distinctive aesthetic elements became part of a visual vocabulary that was recognized and understood by audiences worldwide, regardless of their familiarity with his specific origins. Anime and manga productions that featured giant robots or mechanical monsters often incorporated design elements or thematic concepts that could be traced back to Mechagodzilla's influence, while their creators acknowledged both consciously and unconsciously that the mechanical kaiju had established templates and expectations that needed to be either honored or deliberately subverted depending upon the specific stories they wished to tell and the audiences they sought to reach. Western science fiction and fantasy productions that included artificial creatures or technological antagonists similarly drew upon the conceptual framework that Mechagodzilla had helped to establish. While their creators recognized that audiences possessed cultural literacy about mechanical monsters that had been shaped by decades of exposure to kaiju media and related entertainment that made certain narrative shortcuts and visual references immediately comprehensible without requiring extensive exposition or explanation. The international recognition that Mechagodzilla achieved through his various media appearances created a global fan base that transcended traditional cultural boundaries, while demonstrating the universal appeal of stories about the relationship between natural and artificial forms of life, as audiences from diverse backgrounds found elements in his character and symbolism that resonated with their own cultural traditions and contemporary concerns about technological development and its potential consequences for human society. Fan communities that developed around Mechagodzilla created networks of enthusiasts who shared information, artwork, theories, and creative works that extended his cultural influence far beyond the official productions that had originally featured him, while their collective efforts to preserve, analyze, and celebrate his legacy ensured that his significance would continue to grow rather than diminish. As time passed, and new generations discovered his appeal through both classic and contemporary presentations, academic analysis of Mechagodzilla's cultural significance provided scholarly validation for what fans had long understood intuitively about his importance as a cultural symbol, while researchers from fields ranging from film studies to sociology to psychology found in his character and evolution valuable insights into how popular culture reflected and shaped societal attitudes toward technology, artificial intelligence, environmental destruction, and the complex relationships between progress and tradition that characterized modern life. The archetype of the mechanical doppelganger that Mechagodzilla had established proved remarkably durable across different storytelling contexts and cultural environments, as creators continued to find new ways to explore themes of identity, authenticity, and the potential for technology to replace, rather than merely augment, natural processes, while audiences remained fascinated by stories that questioned the boundaries between genuine and artificial forms of life and consciousness. Literary analysis of Mechagodzilla's narrative functions revealed sophisticated storytelling techniques that used his presence to explore philosophical questions about the nature of consciousness, the ethics of artificial creation, and the potential consequences of human attempts to improve upon natural designs. While his various incarnations demonstrated different approaches to these themes that reflected the evolving concerns and capabilities of their respective historical periods. The themes of technology versus nature that Mechagodzilla embodied proved remarkably adaptable to different cultural contexts and contemporary issues, as each new appearance allowed creators to address current concerns about artificial intelligence, environmental destruction, corporate power, military technology, and the potential for human creations to exceed their creators' ability to control or understand them, while maintaining the essential dramatic and symbolic elements that made such stories compelling and meaningful. Environmental interpretations of Mechagodzilla's symbolism connected his mechanical nature to broader concerns about industrialization and its impact upon natural ecosystems, while his role as an artificial creature that sought to replace or destroy natural life forms provided metaphorical representations of how technological advancement could threaten environmental stability and the survival of species that had evolved over millions of years without human interference. Military and political interpretations of Mechagodzilla's significance focused upon his origins as a weapon created by hostile forces, and his evolution into a tool of human defense systems, while his various appearances reflected changing attitudes toward military technology, international cooperation, and the potential for weapon systems to serve either oppressive or protective functions, depending upon who controlled them and how they chose to deploy such awesome capabilities. The psychological dimensions of Mechagodzilla's appeal addressed fundamental human anxieties about being replaced by artificial alternatives that could perform human functions more efficiently while lacking the emotional depth and moral complexity that characterized genuine consciousness, while his interactions with organic kaiju provided opportunities to explore what distinguished authentic life from sophisticated imitation through dramatic conflicts that made abstract philosophical questions concrete and emotionally accessible. The enduring appeal of the anti-Godzilla concept that Mechagodzilla represented demonstrated audiences' continued fascination with stories about confronting distorted reflections of familiar characters and symbols, while his role as a dark mirror to the Monster King allowed creators to explore negative aspects of power, aggression, and dominance that might be uncomfortable to address directly through heroic characters, but could be safely examined through antagonists who embodied these characteristics without moral ambiguity. The evolution of Mechagodzilla's portrayal across different decades and technological contexts provided a unique window into changing attitudes toward artificial intelligence and robotics, as each new incarnation reflected contemporary understanding of what mechanical consciousness might entail and how such artificial beings might relate to their human creators and the natural world that they were designed to either protect or replace, depending upon the specific agendas that guided their construction and deployment. The international adaptations and interpretations of Mechagodzilla demonstrated the character's remarkable flexibility in accommodating different cultural perspectives and storytelling traditions, while his successful integration into non-Japanese productions proved that certain archetypal concepts possessed universal appeal that could transcend their original cultural contexts without losing the essential characteristics that made them meaningful and compelling to diverse audiences. Fan creativity that flourished around Mechagodzilla took countless forms, ranging from artwork and literature to music and performance, while enthusiasts found in his character inspiration for exploring their own creative interests and connecting with communities of like-minded individuals who shared their appreciation for the complex themes and spectacular presentations that his various appearances had provided across multiple decades of cultural evolution. The preservation efforts that fans undertook to maintain access to Mechagodzilla's complete filmography and related materials demonstrated the depth of commitment that communities of enthusiasts were willing to make in ensuring that future generations would have opportunities to discover and appreciate the character's contributions to popular culture. While their archival work often exceeded the preservation efforts of official institutions and commercial entities, the critical re-evaluation of Mechagodzilla's significance that occurred as academic interest in popular culture grew provided new frameworks for understanding his importance beyond simple entertainment value, while scholarly analysis revealed layers of meaning and cultural significance that had been present in his character from the beginning, but had not been fully recognized or articulated by previous generations of critics and commentators. The technological innovations that each new Mechagodzilla production had required drove advances in special effects, animation, and filmmaking techniques that benefited the entire entertainment industry, while his complex design requirements pushed craftsmen and artists to develop new methods for creating convincing mechanical creatures that could function effectively in both practical and digital production environments. The global recognition that Mechagodzilla achieved through his various appearances created opportunities for cultural exchange and international collaboration that extended beyond simple commercial transactions to include genuine artistic partnerships between creators from different countries who found in his character common ground for exploring shared concerns about technology, environment, and the future of human civilization in an increasingly complex and interconnected world. And so we reach the end of our metallic chronicle, having traced the gleaming path of cinema's most formidable artificial kaiju through 7 decades of cinematic evolution, from the silver screens of 1970 seconds Japan to the digital landscapes of modern Hollywood. Mechagodzilla has remained a constant reminder of humanity's complex relationship with technology and our eternal fear that our creations might one day surpass us. In the deep places of mechanical memory, where servo motors hum their electronic lullabies and circuits dream of synthetic dominion, the legacy of Mechagodzilla continues to inspire new generations of storytellers and monster enthusiasts. The king of mechanical kaiju may fall in battle time and again, but like all great mythological figures, he rises anew with each telling, each incarnation more powerful than the last. Rest now, fellow chronicler of metallic dreams, knowing that somewhere in the vast archives of cinema history, the thunder of artificial footsteps still echoes, ready to awaken whenever humanity needs to confront its own technological reflection in the mirror of monstrous imagination.